In Unit 2, many different categories of stereotypes were introduced. In the following interview, you will listen to several respondents from different nations, sharing their personal experiences of being stereotyped and stereotyping others. Can you describe a personal experience of being stereotyped? What was your reaction?
Alcohol is often involved in parties in the Western world. Once I joined my friends in a bar, and I've since met even more friends there. They were surprised that my face didn't turn red after several sips of beer, and that I was not even drunk after having 2 or 3 beers. But the fact is that everyone's body is different, and we react to chemicals differently. Although it might be true that some Asian people easily get drunk, like what people see in the movies, I don't think it should be a basis to judge anyone from Asian countries. What makes me angry is when people I meet abroad think that not drinking is just boring. It's quite a stupid idea, and I really don't think that's the only way to enjoy oneself and relax.
I was born and raised in Guatemala. However, my grandparents on my father's side migrated from China to Guatemala, where my dad was born. My mom has some Asian blood as well. Therefore, by appearance, I look Asian, but my background is all from Guatemala. Throughout my life, I have been stereotyped. When I was in school in Guatemala, people associated my good scores in tests for being Asian, and they also tended to trust me more because of my Asian background, which I found quite favorable and made me strive to keep those honest and responsible attributes. Nevertheless, sometimes I perceived that other people tended to have an attitude of superiority when they just met me, because Chinese people are stereotyped to be rather silent and passive when interacting with Western cultures. This had negative impacts, but also positive in the sense that people were more open when talking to me, and then I could show them that there was no difference among us. For the past 3 years and a half that I have been living in Taiwan, I have experienced many cases in which I have been stereotyped. For instance, as an international student in Taiwan, I tend to have more foreign friends than local friends. When I am with my foreign friends and we have to speak Chinese, when buying food or asking for information, Taiwanese people tend to speak to me and ignore them, even though their Chinese is better than mine. This always gives me a lot of pressure to handle situations, but it's good for me to improve my Chinese speaking abilities. On the other hand, when I am with Taiwanese friends, they assume I understand everything when I usually don't, which makes it hard for me to follow up the conversation. But the most impactful experience of being stereotyped in my years living in Taiwan has been the times I've had to look for an apartment to rent. Landlords usually don't rent to foreigners because they believe that all foreigners are troublesome and messy. The 2 times I've had to rent an apartment have been very complicated in the way that most of the houses are not available to foreigners. I understand their concerns. However, I believe that every person should be judged by their personality rather than by generalizing that all foreigners are the same.
I have experienced stereotypes so many times in Taiwan. For example, one of my classmates at the university asked me a really strange question which I was shocked to hear. After the class, we went to have a meal and I told him that I was a Muslim and I should eat halal or vegetarian food. Then we went to one of the vegetarian restaurants near the university and made some conversation about Islam. He said that in Taiwan they know that Muslims do not eat pork, marry 4 women and use camels as transportation. And he asked me, so currently how many mothers do you have now? After hearing this, I laughed for a while and told him that this is only one kind of stereotype, and it doesn't mean that every Muslim should marry 4 women. I told him that I have only 1 mother, and in our country, it's not allowed to marry more than 1 woman. And the camel was only used in ancient times, and now nobody uses a camel as transportation. After that, he apologized to me and said that what he has learned about Muslims was incorrect. I think we Muslims or any foreigner who studies or lives in Taiwan shouldn't be angry when he hears this type of question, because they have also learned it from somewhere or someone wrongly, and it's not their mistake.
As a Finnish man, I've been stereotyped multiple times by either foreigners or fellow Finnish. We have a certain kind of stereotype about people when we hear they are Finnish as well. I can't say these stereotypes are good most of the time, but it is something that we have earned because of our actions. And I do believe that every single stereotype has a small piece of truth behind it. This is the reason I can't get too mad about getting stereotyped. Sometimes it is even good to embrace the wrongful thing that is said about our culture or characteristics and celebrate it with our friends. For example, it is quite well known that people from Northern Europe can be quite cold and tend to drink too much alcohol. At least this particular stereotype is associated with the Finnish quite often. But rather than getting mad and offended by it, we like to agree and have a toast to celebrate it. If someone would actually condemn us and think of us as lesser beings just by believing a stereotype, they are not worthy of our one's time anyway. Sometimes the stereotypes are right on. Last semester, a French girl was introducing herself to me and heard that I am Finnish, so she gave me a handshake rather than cheek kisses, which are appropriate in France. I felt quite thankful about this, because most of us Finns value our private space around us, and that stereotype is 100% correct about me.
What are some of the national stereotypes about your culture or ethnicity? How true are they?
Being born and raised in Indonesia as a Chinese descendant, I always identify myself as Indo-Chinese or more Chinese. In Indonesia, there are many kinds of sentiments and stereotypes toward the Chinese ethnic group. People always consider individuals that belong to this group as a wealthy people. This is derived from the fact that Chinese descendants in Indonesia control more than 70% of the country's economy. Drawing from this fact, I can say this is true, but not 100% correct. Statistically, most Indo-Chinese can enjoy a good quality of life. However, there is also a part of group that lives poorly. Another stereotype that circulates among Indonesians about people with Chinese ethnicity is that they are very stingy. I do not know the background of this issue, but I can state with confidence that this is completely false. Ethnic Chinese people are not stingy. In fact, they are very generous. This is logical as they have capital and thus it is possible for them to donate their extra income. I gained another perspective about national stereotypes after my stay in Taiwan. Here, I identify myself as Indonesian, not as ethnic Chinese. A lot of people in Taiwan already have prior knowledge about Indonesians and it somehow creates a stereotype. For instance, there are some Taiwanese that believe Indonesians are all Muslims. This might come from the fact that the majority of population in Indonesia believes in Islam, and maybe they often meet Indonesians who are Muslims in Taiwan. But of course, not all Indonesians are Muslims. There are still 5 different religions represented in Indonesia. There is also a stereotype that Indonesians are poor. A lot of Indonesians in Taiwan are domestic workers who come from a low economic status. Moreover, Indonesia is still a developing country, hence, no wonder people think that way. However, not all Indonesians are poor. There are definitely a number of people who are rich.
If you say Russia, in everyone's mind, there are so many stereotypes which are very popular around the world. I would like to begin by telling you some stereotypes about Russians and Russia, as well as which of them are true and which of them are not. First of all, if you tell someone from any country that you are from Russia, they immediately ask you if you like to drink vodka and like to dance. Or they just loudly say vodka and then laugh out loud. And they think that Russians drink only vodka and they drink it all the time. Another stereotype which people from most countries think about us is that we are all hackers and we always hack other developed countries, governments, and learn their secrets. This one is very popular with people from the US. And if you tell them that you are from Russia, they think that you are a hacker or a spy. There is also another stereotype. Mostly Chinese people think that every girl or woman in Russia smokes cigarettes and that Russian girls are very beautiful until they have children. Another funny stereotype that is known about Russia is that it snows in Russia in every season and there is no hot weather in Russia. Okay, now let's talk about which ones are true and which ones are not. In Russia, we have over 186 ethnic groups and there are 21 national republics and autonomous regions. Yes, it's true that Russians like to drink vodka, but it doesn't mean that we drink it all the time and at every meal. And it doesn't mean that every Russian drinks vodka. For example, 15% of Russian population is Muslim and they do not drink alcohol at all. And people don't drink alcohol every day and everywhere. For the hacker stereotypes, we can say that not all Russians are hackers, but it's true that we have many professional hackers. We can give an example of the fact that most of the pirated contents of the internet are put out by Russians. About the girls who smoke cigarettes, as people from every nation, we also have girls or guys who smoke cigarettes. But it's not true that everyone smokes. About not being beautiful after having children, it's not true. Our women have the same beauty even after having children, and they are still thin, beautiful, and continue going to work, just as others. Because we have a large landmass, we have different climates in every part of our country. We also have spring, summer, and autumn seasons in our country. And it's not true that it's always snowing in Russia.
There's a typical stereotype about Taiwanese or Chinese, and in general, people think that we eat rice and noodles all the time. But actually, it's somewhat true because it's the main dish that we consume every day, like bread for French and potatoes for peoples of other nationalities. Many people think that Asians don't party much and we are boring compared to other races of people, so sometimes we are automatically dismissed where party invitations are involved. However, it is not true that Taiwanese students don't party. It's just not a kind of party most Westerners understand, like going to nightclubs or bars. Taiwanese students prefer to be comfortable, not to have too much social stress, simply gathering with friends in someone's house, having food and drinks, or sometimes going to karaoke and singing till morning. It is quite ironic that Taiwanese never really judge Westerners for not going to KTV, but are often judged by Westerners for not clubbing like they do. It is true that Taiwanese are generally shyer than people from other nationalities, but this is how we are born to be. Although there are certain Taiwanese who are outgoing and funny, the educational environment that we have and the moral lessons we have received from parents and teachers are reasons that make most Taiwanese this way. But it never stops us from being friendly and kind. Also, there's no doubt that most Taiwanese people are kind-hearted and are always willing to help when someone is in need. I think stereotypes are not always bad, and it also depends on ways that we see or experience them. What is more important is to view each person as an individual, trying to see them in the way they act and how they think, no matter where they come from. And after all, we are all unique.
Coming from Guatemala, I have found that internationally, people recognize me as a Latin American instead of a Guatemalan. This can be attributed to the fact that Guatemala is a part of the Central American region, where there are a lot of small countries that share the similar traditions and speak the same language, Spanish. At the beginning, I was a little bit sensitive about it because Guatemalans, as well as all the other Central and South American countries, can easily tell the difference from one country to another. However, I came to understand the similarities we share, and now I'm more open when people associate me with the Latin American region. Because of the similar backgrounds we all share from being colonized by the Spanish, our traditions and characteristics are similar. This also has bad factors, such as the generalization that all of us are similar in the negative aspects. The common stereotypes for Latin American people are that we're always late, we're loud, and we like to party and dance. Some people also say that we're very passionate and sometimes lack manners. Like any other stereotype, this cannot be generalized for all of us. Each person has their own characteristics and their own values and principles. It depends on how they were raised and what they believe is right and wrong, their habits and values. I am afraid to say that there is a tendency for unpunctuality, but it depends on the individual if they are or not. However, it is common for many people. Being loud is also common because we tend to speak louder than other cultures. It is also perceived as normal in our countries, unlike many Asian nations. So even though it is a bad habit to generalize all of these stereotypes, I think the most appropriate way to judge someone would be not having a preconception of them.
Let's talk about sports and athletics, especially black guys and sports. Sports as an entertainment is something enjoyed by every race. However, black guys are particularly known for having a love for sports. This stereotype is fueled by the fact that there are a number of blacks that are doing great in sports. Let's take basketball for instance. There are a number of black superstars like Kobe, Curry, LeBron, among others. Also, right here in Taiwan, in almost every university football team, like NCTU, NTUST, YZU, NTHU, you will find a dark-skinned student on the team. Relating this to my country, I'll narrow it down to football, which is the common sport played and enjoyed by most guys and recently some ladies too. So usually the question I've gotten or the ice-breaking conversation I've had often relates to sports, particularly basketball, which unfortunately I am terrible at. So is this stereotype true? Yes, but again, this exists only if you are making a generalization. Another stereotype concerns the sun and our skin color. For most people, seeing blacks for the first time, the first question they usually ask is the sun very hot in your country? Or is it always hot in your country? Or were you like this when you were born? For some, they get to the extent of coming to touch your skin, just to be sure. The stereotype in this is that it's because of the sun, that is why we are black. Disappointingly, this is not so, considering that there are blacks born and living in countries that are quite far from the equator with colder climates, and yet they are still blacks. Or the fact that sometimes during summer it equally gets quite sunny and hot here in Taiwan, and yet Taiwanese don't have that complexion. For the attention that I do get for being black, sometimes it's adorable. For instance, when I meet a cute kid who is just curious about me, or when I get people who come to touch my hair or rub my skin to see if it will come off. Unfortunately, sometimes it could be unwelcoming. On several occasions, I've been photographed without my permission, or someone calling everyone's attention in a restaurant to look at me. But I think I've gotten used to this, and it's not much of a concern as it was before when I first got here.
A Finnish man doesn't speak nor kiss. At least that is how one of the most famous Finnish proverbs goes. But to be honest, it creates a stereotype that is mostly correct. You might have heard that people coming from the northern parts of the world tend to be cold as the weather there is there. I can understand where this assumption comes from. Walking on the streets in Finland, you can't see smiling faces or hear laughter that often, not to mention that we have no idea what small talk means. If you have nothing worthy of saying, it is better to stay quiet. A not so flattering image of Finnish people is painted here if I add the alcohol consumption, which is the highest in Europe, and suicide rates to the discussion. However, in some weird masochistic and nationalistic way, I and many other Finns feel proud about these characteristic stereotypes. They make us special. As a small country, we want to be seen and noticed among the giants such as USA, Germany or China. So when we travel abroad, we enjoy showing how much we can drink, and we do tend to wander around with grumpy faces. These aren't huge stereotypes at all. But when a foreigner comes to talk to us and asks if Finland is really that cold and if we really can drink that much alcohol, you might even see a glimpse of a smile on our faces while we admit it with a faint yes.
Does stereotyping help or hinder communication across cultures?
According to my personal experience, stereotype can influence our communication both positively and negatively. It depends on the stereotype itself. It is important to note that not all stereotypes are unpleasant. There are many constructive stereotypes. For instance, Indonesians often consider Indians as highly intelligent individuals. They are really smart, well-trained, and able to tackle many kinds of problems. Therefore, there are a lot of companies in Indonesia which love to hire Indian expats as their employee. This kind of stereotype certainly brings an advantage to Indians. Another example is Thailand. This country is the most known for being the land of smiles. Thai people are seen as very friendly individuals and possess a high degree of hospitality. Thus, many people from other countries really like to visit Thailand or mingle with Thais, because they believe that people from Thailand are very warm and good friendship material. This shows us that stereotype can actually support the communication across cultures. On the other hand, stereotypes contain negative sentiment most of the time. In many cases, stereotypes form as prejudice toward other people or groups. When this kind of situation occurs, it will surely affect the communication negatively. An experience that personally happened to me, as I have mentioned before, is that a lot of people consider individuals from my hometown to be harsh or rude due to the way we speak and behave. This kind of label will definitely affect and bother the communication. Some of my friends even confess that they are sometimes afraid to talk with people from Medan, one of the cities in Indonesia where I am living, simply because they believe that the stereotype is true. Another example is from another city in Indonesia called Manado. A lot of people believe that the Madonese girls are very money-oriented and they are not future wife material. This is a stereotype which is not true. However, it causes a disadvantage for Madonese girls.
My comment on this is first to categorize stereotype in two different aspects, positive stereotypes and negative stereotypes. Take for instance, someone coming from Africa meeting a non-African. The first question or comment stereotypically describes the African as living in a war-torn nation or living in a really poor home with no food to eat. Such a comment could be a little offensive and point out how ignorant the non-African is. In such manner, this could hinder communication between the two. Let's talk about the other side of the coin. Let's say you meet a very nice guy who is a sports enthusiast. Then they come up to you and say something like, "Oh my God, you look like Kobe Bryant," which is a comment I often get. I think that's a funny and positive element to enhance communication between the two. Sometimes the stereotype doesn't have to be negative or positive, but it's the way it comes across in conversation, from how someone might talk about it or the way the person might interrogate you about it, as if to say you're the only person with that stereotype. In my case, I would say that I've been stereotyped both negatively and positively. The reward for my experience was an Angry Bird mug, because in my first year in Taiwan, avoiding public places or such conversation made my favorite restaurants to be 7-Eleven. But on the plus side, I didn't allow that to hold me back. Instead, I've made lots of amazing and influential lifetime friends here in Taiwan. My final word on that is that it doesn't hurt to politely ask someone to confirm a stereotype for you. Always ask in a nice way.
After hearing each of the respondents' answers, perhaps you notice that they also talked about national stereotypes, and most important of all, how they view stereotypes. Some responses were very positive. some negative, and some were funny, right? In any case, most of them agree that there are positive and negative stereotypes, and people can choose to respond either way. Most important of all, stereotypes can only serve to depict a group of people in a general way, but are not the only way to judge others. After considering their responses, you might want to ask yourself how you would respond if you were stereotyped. Would you laugh about it? Or would you resist it?